Fred McNeil, and you're watching QAC TV7. Thanks for joining us on our weekly show called Veteran Stories. And Pete Abbott, thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
Let's remind everybody, last show we went up to about 1964, where, and you pointed out very clearly to us, we were involved big time in Vietnam, but I think most of the American public wasn't aware. So 64, and you're going to correct me,
yep.
64 started kicking off a change maybe not only in the Navy, but the whole America and what was going on in Vietnam. How's that sound as a quick summary?
That's where we were.
Okay,
64.
let's go. Okay, take us from there.
No disagreements with that. 64, I finished my tour teaching at Stanford University, and I went to Japan to be the captain of that little minesweeper in that picture there.
Okay, now remind us the names.
This is the USS Gannett, MSC Coastal Minesweeper number 290, one of two. Number 289, the Albatross, and the Gannett were assigned to the minesweeping squadron, home ported in Japan, which was part of the 7th Fleet and a permanent resident out there. So I went out there with my then wife and little baby, 3-month-old.
And what rank were you then?
I was just my first year as a lieutenant.
Okay, so you're a young lieutenant. Okay,
yeah, I was
all
about
right.
28 and had decided to stay in for this tour. Exciting times, not realizing what was ahead. Maybe I should have been a better forecaster.
So what's unfolding? Yeah.
But anyway, I get out there on a Friday night. I think I told you the Monday morning, the 8 minesweepers in our mothership, we left.
You're gone.
And we went to Vietnam. And we stayed there for 7 months.
Just help us with geography. From Japan to Vietnam, how many days are we talking to get there?
Probably about 5-6 days of sailing at 10 knots.
Okay, you're just going a nice slow speed.
Well, that's a max speed for these things.
Okay.
They're not speedboats.
Okay, all right,
they're designed for other things.
Right.
These are speedboats, destroyers. They'll do
right.
35, 36 knots. But
so 5 days or so to get
so
there.
we get to the Philippines, have the change of command ceremony. I've ridden down on the boat as a guest and had 5 days with the guy I was going to relieve. Got to know the ship a little bit. We're in Subic Bay for 4 hours, and the next thing I know, we're...
That quick, 4 hours?
I'm the captain, he's gone, and the ship's underway, and we're headed for Vietnam. And this was sort of a jump start. And it started a 7-month period of operations that started near Saigon. And we went to the major port cities all the way up to the 17th parallel.
Okay, and all the South Vietnamese port cities.
Yeah,
okay.
And we worked with the Vietnamese Navy, and we worked with some of the U.S. advisory forces that were there in a very fledgling organization up in Da Nang, which is where the Navy interests were headquartered. They had just assigned their first head guy, who was a rear admiral, and some of the CIA guys were working out of there. There was a lot of stuff going on. But anyway, our job was to sweep the wreckage and look for ordnance from World War II,
right? Okay.
and clean up the harbors, and then get a defensive perimeter set up with buoys that had listening devices. They could hear boats coming, and try to make sure that people didn't get into those.
Safe.
Yeah, it was a harbor security defense. And the minesweepers were really good because we had great little sonars in them that could find stuff on the bottom. And we found old ships that were sunk.
No, Japanese, American, or both?
Yeah, Japanese and other commercial ships that had been sunk in World War II.
All right.
And working with the explosive underwater ordnance guys, we went down and blew those ships down to a certain depth, so the channels would let big cargo ships in, and particularly places like Cam Bay, which became the biggest logistics.
What was Cam Bay like in 1965? I know when I was there.
Well, when we went in 64 and steamed into the inner harbor, there was a Japanese destroyer still on its bottom, lying on the breakwater, and there was a French Foreign Legion port on the other side of the breakwater going in, which was dropped down in the harbor. About half of the fort
very
had been
primitive environment,
and all the little ladies in the black pajamas and the funny hats with the buffalo doing the rice stuff. It was a classic.
And Cam Bay, as we know, became a major port.
The major.
And when we left, the Russians used it as a warm weather port, right? It developed that much.
We left it, and I don't know how many billions of dollars of supplies and things were still there when the North Vietnamese army took it over on their way down from the north, headed for Saigon.
Right.
But that was one of the forfeitures.
It was a major military
Yeah, we couldn't
port.
get it all out.
Yeah.
Oh, it was designed for ships with 60-foot depth clearance access. It was the biggest freighters and cargo ships in the world could get in there. Battleships could get in there.
Okay, so you found it very primitive,
Yeah.
sunken Japanese ships, French Foreign Legion forts crushing in the water,
Yeah.
and you had to get this ready.
But there was a war going on,
Right.
and it was the Viet Cong against the South Vietnamese forces at that time with American advisory
Right.
forces, but not many of them. I think we might have been up to maybe 40, 50,000 people in the country at that time, spread across the entire nation. It had been divided into 4 operating
Right.
corps. We had
So very small in terms of what
Yeah.
was about to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah.
Yeah.
So in 64, we go through this whole exercise. And at the end of our time there, we were at the north end of the operational zone at the 17th parallel.
Which separated south from north.
And one night, we all left and had finished our tour. We knew we were headed back to Japan. We were finally going to get to go home. And the idea was to go back to Subic and kind of get ready to go home logistically. Well, we took off at night and we left Da Nang and we turned off all the lights and the radios and everything. And at midnight, we made a hard right turn and headed for the Philippines.
Okay.
But we left everybody with the impression that we were headed north. Well, that was the allure for the North Vietnamese to respond with the PT boats.
Okay, that you were going to go up the
Yeah,
coast
they
and
were
spy
coming
or
out to
whatever.
get
Okay.
us, and
All right.
3 destroyers slid right in behind us with no things radiating.
lights
So
or anything.
nobody, we were essentially removed from the situation.
Right, right.
We went east and they went north.
Okay.
And at the end of that was the Tonkin Gulf incident.
Now remind everybody, you and I see that as the beginning of
Right.
major involvement.
No,
Remind
I told you that
yeah.
things changed.
Right.
And what changed was that the Tonkin Gulf incident, whether it was coincidental or it was manufactured on our behalf, using 7 months of these operations
Right,
that we did as bait. And we
Come and look
pulled
at it,
them
yeah.
out and we got engaged with them in an open ocean 12 out of the 12-mile limit naval battle.
We were in international waters.
And the next day, the carrier strike force from the Gulf of Tonkin bombed the oil fields in Vinh.
Okay.
And that was the first combat in North Vietnam.
Now, again, to remind younger people out there, and you tell me what happened. These PT boats, is that correct?
Yeah, they came out of Vinh,
They came
which
out.
was a North
Did
Vietnamese
they fire
port.
upon us? Or?
Yes.
They did, okay.
They thought they were engaging the minesweepers,
Okay.
and they ran smack dab
destroyed.
into some destroyers, and they were dispatched with.
Very quickly,
Yeah.
picking on destroyers.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's not a good idea.
No,
These
okay.
things on this destroyer are pretty effective.
Now, what was the reaction? I mean, politically, there's a storm.
Well,
But
there's
how
a
about-
huge
yeah,
storm,
yeah.
but what it did was allow the executive, the president,
Okay.
to rally the Congress in support of the War Powers extension, which gave the right to engage the North Vietnamese as an enemy.
Now, whether we agree with it or
We
disagree with it,
we didn't declare war
Right.
against them, but they were hostile.
they gave the president the power to use force. Is
Yes.
it correct? He felt necessary.
Yeah.
And and there was only 2 votes against
Yeah,
it.
and then we started what ended up being the major
Okay.
Vietnamese engagement, and it lasted from about 65 when we got our carrier forces beefed up from 1 or 2 carriers to 4 or 5 in the Gulf of Tonkin, and we could fly 1,000 missions a day, which we did, including the B-52s from Guam and all the stuff out of.
Pete, what was tell me the sailors, guys like you running the ships? What's their reaction to the Gulf? I mean, were you surprised, shocked? You saw it as an act of war. What did the people in the Navy think? I mean, the public immediately and the Congress got behind the president and said, "Hey, look, you attacked our ships, Mr. President. We're giving you basically a blank check
Yeah.
to do what you want." What did the military? And what was your reaction as a young lieutenant on the minesweeper?
Well, we were close enough to it, Fred, to have had incidents where some of our people and equipment and ships and advisors had been wounded or killed or hit by enemy fire. There was nothing gentle about this war. We didn't ease into it backwards. We were there in a shooting war between the South Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, the rebels within. The North Vietnamese army hadn't yet come into play, although they were supporting the Viet Cong, and they did support them significantly from sea, logistically. They brought lots of food, ammunition,
down to
support, weapons, explosives, all that stuff came down as an infiltration using fishing boats and small coastal craft. And that was another one of the missions that this force was involved in, was the interdiction and providing the blockade of South Vietnam.
This stuff couldn't get in.
Coast Guard ships, the minesweepers, both the coastals and the oceans, and several small U.S. Navy vessels were involved in that for the entire duration of the war.
So this had been going on before?
Well, it just started up in 64, 65. This is when all this stuff got rolled up. So here you get a bunch of these young guys like me, or with 35 guys and 4 of their officers on your ship, and all of a sudden you're on independent duty, and you're in a place you've never been before, and you're, kind of flak jacketed up to the ears, and your guns are loaded. You don't know whether some guy's going to shoot at you from the
boat's going to come out of nowhere and start shooting at you.
Or 2 guys on either side of a river that you're trying to get up, and they got a mine on a rope, and they pull it underneath you, and when you're there, they pull the rope and smack the mine up on the bottom. I mean, these are the kind of things that you get a little bit sharp-edged, if you will.
Pete,
all of us did.
Hey, refresh me, because I quite frankly don't remember. Did we take any casualties during the Gulf of Tonkin in terms of none of the PT boats? I assume when you say fire, torpedoes, or did they hit anybody? Or
no, we didn't. I don't think anybody got hit in that particular evolution. But later we had destroyer and cruiser gunfire ops above the 17th. That whole thing was
constantly.
Ships would roll in there and do gunfire support against North Vietnamese targets in North Vietnam, and they were opposed by cannons, shore batteries, missiles. Some of those ships got hit.
It was a full contact sport.
I mean, this was a no-joke war.
Okay.
But you got to kind of step back and look at the evolution of the fleet. We're in there.
You're talking about the American fleet.
Yeah, we're in there helping the Vietnamese with their little junks and sampans and advising them, and then the little guys like us come in, and the next thing you know, you got 5 aircraft carriers and 25 destroyers and all the logistics support. You got an ammunition ship every day unloading in Guam, an entire ship full of bombs that are being railroaded to the flight line at Agana and up to the wings of 75 or 100 B-52s, and they're flying 2 missions a day out of there, and every day that ship is emptied and gone back to Concord in California, and another one comes in the harbor in the morning. There were 31 ammo ships in that loop every day.
It started rolling.
And every 3 days, and later on, a little bit later on, when I went back on my next assignment after the minesweeper, I was an operations officer for a destroyer division that became a squadron. 8 destroyers. We would be on gunfire duty for 30 days. And
now you're sitting off the coast of North Vietnam or South?
No, South.
Supporting our kids on the ground.
Now we're supporting U.S. forces in 67, 68. We're doing major amphibious assaults, airlifts in. The 1st Air Cavalry's had that horrible thing that happened up in the Ashaw Valley, and they got clobbered up there. You remember Colonel Moore and his story? We were soldiers, and that was in the 67.
Well, let's go back. I cheated on you. So in 64, we had the Gulf of Tonkin. Were you called back from going to the Philippines and Japan and home, or no?
No. We went on to the Philippines and stayed a couple of days for logistics readiness. Then we all steamed back to Sasebo. Okay, 7 months.
So you were done, kind of.
7 months after our first run down there. Started in July of 64. We're back in early 65 in Japan. We get back there. We're back there 5 weeks, and they turn us around and send us back for another 7 months.
Okay.
Very hard on families.
And you were on the mines.
Still skipper.
So what was the duty then? So you spent a couple months with the family.
Yeah.
You're back. What was the duty?
Well, we did more interdiction work.
Okay.
At that time, we did more blockade work than we did harbor clearance.
Blockade of North Vietnamese or no?
Of the South Vietnamese coast to prevent
these guys
the
bad guys. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
We did have a couple of pleasant excursions. We went down to Thailand, went to Bangkok, and were there for a very nice week of liberty for the crew.
Okay.
We went into Singapore. We got there. We did a little bit of more normal Navy things, but we did most of the time we were there. We were back in Vietnam doing something.
All right.
So, and that's when I had my broken leg, and then my XO took command of the ship while I was in the hospital in Subic Bay getting my knee operated on, and they left and went back to Vietnam and continued their mission. I never went back to the ship. I got air evac'd back to the States.
You had medical situation.
And I spent a year getting back on my feet, and that's when I went to the destroyer division as the operations officer and chief of staff.
Right, okay.
And so now this is 66, 67. Right. And things are really now, we've got 300,000 guys there. The Vietnamese army has expanded hugely. The commitment from the Chinese and the Russians and the North Vietnamese to support the Viet Cong and to be more active in their support on the ground and logistically is creating a bigger and bigger demand for more and more troops. And eventually we get up to 550,000 Americans there, half a million American troops, along with this larger South Vietnamese army. And now they got stuff going on from the 17th parallel to the 4th Corps down at the bottom of Vietnam.
It's a full-scale war.
It's a full-scale war.
Hey,
and it's airplanes and ships and all. I mean, everything you can throw in the mix of a full-scale war short of nuclear weapons, they're being used.
There.
Yeah.
Hey, Pete, you mentioned something. I know very little about it. I'm not sure what you know. You mentioned that the Chinese and the Russians were giving support. Were there Chinese and Russian troops on the ground, or pilots? What was there?
There were advisors in North Vietnam.
Okay.
I don't recall any incident where a Chinese or Russian influence was brought to light by engagement or capture or killing those guys
they stayed up
in the South.
Okay.
I think they pretty well felt that they could do the best help they could give the North Vietnamese was to stay out of the southern.
Give them supplies, give them technical assistance, and
all the surface-to-air missilery and stuff that
was
was tearing our
Chinese
planes out of the sky was all Russian stuff. SA-1s, SA-2s.
And they trained the Vietnamese how to use it. Okay. So go back, 67, you're on a destroyer now.
Well, I'm working as the chief of staff and operations officer to a commodore who is in charge of 4 destroyers.
Okay.
And I joined his staff the day before we left for the Far East and got myself on board there. And there was one other line officer on the staff, and he was the squadron or the division engineering officer. I was the operations officer and chief of staff, and then we had a doctor and a chaplain and about a half a dozen enlisted guys, signalmen.
Now, were you young?
I was just 2 years older than I was when I went.
Is that normal, be that young? And
I was a mid-grade lieutenant. Okay. I'd had command of a ship. I'd spent 36 months on my first destroyer, including being the operations officer of that ship, the comm officer, and the CIC officer. A year each, so I had pretty good ship background.
You had your ticket punched the correct way.
I was fine. I was going good. Career was going good.
For us ground pounders like me and the people, 30-second difference between the destroyer and your minesweeper. Obviously, size is the first one. Speed
150
is
feet, 380 feet.
So double the size plus.
275 crew and 12 officers, 35 crew and 4 officers. 10 knots max, 36 knots.
Armament,
4 5-inch guns, 4 3-inch guns, a lot of 40 millimeter, anti-submarine warfare stuff.
We're loaded, okay.
This ship is built for war. This is a Fletcher-class destroyer of the fame of Arleigh Burke in World War II. These are the guys that did it.
Okay.
And she was built in 43 in Orange, Texas. Was never gone out of commission until I got aboard her, and she didn't go out of commission until the war ended in 75.
Okay, so this was the best type of thing we could put on the water in terms of the destroyer
It was an
class.
older destroyer, but it was still functional. It still had all of its capabilities, and it had been modernized to some extent from its original configuration.
So what did they have you doing as the operations officer?
Well, as a squadron operations officer, my Commodore got duties like being the head guy to run the gun line, which meant all of the ships committed to shore bombardment services
He was in
through
charge
all of the entire country of South Vietnam. And I ran the gun line from the radio room on one of the destroyers who was served as our flagship. They would welcome our little staff on board and, harbor us.
Sure.
And we would use the ship's capabilities, including their radio rooms and that sort of stuff. And
So you're telling...
so I'm sitting at a teletype sending messages to a
And it was the old
battleship here.
teletype.
Through an encrypted radio system. But I used to say to people, I had a good day yesterday. I shot 17 ships, including a battleship, 2 cruisers, and 14 destroyers. And we put X thousands of rounds onto the bad guys in 17 different gunfire zones all around the country. And every 3 days, the ships would leave the gun line, go out, get next to an ammo ship, going by, take another reload, go back to station. And that was a 30-day assignment. And the guy in charge of that, when my boss was out there, he was the task force or task unit commander for all the ships assigned to the gunfire line. And I was his operational guy to make that happen.
Now, how were targets picked? And
that was a very interesting relationship between the ships and the local spotters and the district chiefs and the Vietnamese authorities who would approve or disapprove the engagement of targets. So there was a constant political overlay on top of all of our actions in what we could do.
Now, where would you get directly by the Commodore to tell you? How did you handle dealing? Or did you have to actually deal online with these people, or how did
the individual ships that were assigned to a user ashore? The shore fire control guy was usually an Army guy or a Marine guy, maybe a Vietnamese guy, but mostly our folks. And they had a radio to the ship.
All right.
And they would call in the coordinates to the targets.
We need fire, yada, yada.
And you would get an okay from another chain of command would come in on another circuit that they would approve the fire mission.
And this was done on a daily basis?
Yeah, 24 hours a day.
24 hours?
Yeah, because at night you did H&I fire, which is harassment interdiction.
Okay. Just let them know you're there and you can find them.
Yeah, you'd take a circular template, put it over the chart, had 6 quadrants, and you'd throw a dice, and whatever number came up, quadrant 1 got a bullet.
Just to remind them
that we're here. And every 4 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever the cycle of harassment was, you put another round into that so they didn't get a lot of sleep.
And this was 24/7?
24/7 for years and years and
So
years.
how did the crew, explain to me, I remember I'm an Army guy, so I don't know, how did the crew do that? Obviously you had 3 shifts, or how did...
Well, you have enough people to have, typically you have a 3-section steaming watch.
Okay, which means
So
3 different groups rotating,
4-hour
eating,
watches,
sleeping. Okay.
Yeah, and you dog the evening watch from 4 to 8 in the evening. You split it into 2.
Okay.
So as you rotate through these watches, your time of watch each day changes because of the short 2-hour stint which you rotate through.
So
now, when you're firing guns and doing things like that, the ship is at either condition, general quarters.
Everybody's
when
ready.
Everybody's and the ship's buttoned up, and all the watertight integrity is at a maximum. You're full combat.
Everybody's on board.
You're in. This is it. You're at the. You're like the cavalry riding fast.
You're going.
Okay, so then you have a little bit of a modified thing. You got a port and starboard watch steaming section. So you got half the crew on, half the crew off, and they rotate.
They're sleeping, eating.
And there are times when that, if you're, let's say you got a 1-gun operation for the night, you're only going to be using one barrel.
Gun. Okay.
And you're going to be steaming up and down. You can do that on a port and starboard watch with the forward end of the ship kind of buttoned up for GQ, and the back end.
So the
kind
one
of
gun is the activity of that night.
That's right. So you adjust the level of readiness, the degree of, let's say, armed condition the responsiveness, the number of sensors that are alert, and you're not looking for a submarine when you're in 50 feet
So
of
you're
water.
a little calmer. We got people sleeping
and
in
we got guys resting, and we got the galley working and making food, that kind of stuff. So
I mean, what's the environment? Tell me again. Remember, I'm an Army guy. Noise levels, and I mean, is it?
Well, I've been retired since 1979.
Okay,
that's a long time.
Right.
What is that? 37 years.
Yes.
And I still miss the noise.
Okay.
The fans, the steam, the
loud.
shafts,
I mean,
the rotation.
when
No.
one gun is shooting.
The gunfire is not the issue.
Oh, that's not the issue.
You miss the noise of the ship.
Okay, the action of the crew moving around.
The whole environment of the electronics, the generators, the motors, the valves, the engines, the steam, the stuff coming out of the stack, the buzz
That in special
of a
environment.
ship. There is no other environment I can think of unless you're a NASCAR race driver inside the cockpit.
All the senses are working.
Yeah,
all the senses.
And everywhere where you need a sensor, there's somebody stationed as a lookout or a watchkeeper. All of the critical stuff's got somebody looking out for it. You don't want the boilers to be down there without somebody be able to turn them off or it.
It's very exciting. It's what you're telling me. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the longer you spend in the business, if you're an officer and you're a ship guy, the more you got to get into the guts of the engineering and the ordnance and the housekeeping and the cooking and the water tending and the boiler maintenance and whether the shaft is greased and lubed or.
This all has to be taken care of for you to function at 100%.
And all of this development is aimed at readying you to become one of the executives that are responsible for the, I would say, the orchestration, the symphonic.
Make sure it all works.
Thing that gets the synergies that work together between the people and the equipment and the environment and the sea.
It's like being a head football coach or a quarterback. It's kind of like guys.
You have all of that going on at the same time, and it's a very energizing, challenging thing, especially for some young guy
Pretty exciting
who likes
stuff.
machinery and equipment. And I played football. I was a boxer. I was competitive. I like contact sports. There was a lot of stuff about going to sea, and I'd been a sailboat racer all my life. So the ocean,
which was great.
To me, this was where I belong.
This is where you want to be.
Yeah.
Well, Pete, I know you hate me to say this, but we've done another show.
Oh, God.
Didn't you just start a minute ago? Okay. Well, look, we're going to do this. As long as George...
I'm sorry.
No. This is what we want. Remember, as long as our producer and director sandwiches hold out, we'll continue this, all right? So we've gone from 64 to about 67, right?
Yeah, I finished that tour with the destroyer's division commander, who became a squadron commander. They gave us another 4 destroyers halfway through that job, and at the end of that, I went to England.
Okay. Well, let's stop there. We'll continue. George, our producer, will remember England, and that's where we're going to start.
But a lot of exciting stuff happened after the deployment to Vietnam with the squadron or with the division.
All right. Well,
when we got back to Long Beach, because we got involved in some of the most interesting parts of my entire career.
Okay, well, let's hold that thought. Yeah. England and getting back to Long Beach. Can we get you coming again next week?
Sure.
Okay. Hey, we're going to have a 20-part series. Pete, this is all a trick to get you to write a book.
Yeah, I know.
All right? Well, look, we've been here with Pete Abbott. We're going through his experiences in the Vietnam War. Now, you've been watching Veteran Stories on QAC TV7. We're going to continue. It was a 10-year war, and our TV 12 years. Our TV show might last all of 10 or 12 years.
Could be.
Okay.
It might take that long to talk about.
Okay, Pete, thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred.
Fred McNeil, thank you for watching QAC TV7.